guys, down here in the shop tonight with a brand new tool. Picked up the Razorweld 160P. I'm upgrading from my Thermal Arc 95S, which was a lift TIG only, to this unit, which is a high frequency start and also has the pulse function. When looking to upgrade, looking at the price ranges that these type of units go for. And to find a high frequency start unit that had the pulse feature, the cheapest that I was really being able to find was another Thermal Arc unit, and it was almost $1,100. I think it was $1,075. So I really couldn't find any unit that really matched this one as far as the features for the dollar. So it's sitting here in the shop now. Welding supplies from IOC is where you can get them, and I think it was $729 retail. So a pretty good deal in comparison to what I had been looking at. Now, this is my very first high frequency start unit. I've never used a TIG with these type of features before, specifically the pulse function, and that was what I was looking forward to almost as much as the high frequency start that this machine has. Now, this machine does not run a pedal out of the box. It is compatible with a pedal, but out of the box it uses the TIG torch with the button built into it here, as well as a dial. The dial is to be able to adjust the amperage, and the button is how you initiate the arc. It has the 2T and 4T settings as far as how the button works. The 2T setting is you press the button and hold it, it will start the arc, and you hold it for as long as you'd like the arc to go, release it, and it does the ramp down and then the post cooling. The 4T setting, you press and hold the button to start the arc, then you can release it and the arc will continue. Press it again and it will drop down to the minimum current level, you release it, and it does the post cooling. So pretty simple as far as that goes. I'm using this mostly in the 2T mode from what I've found here in my few little test welds that I've been able to do so far. Mostly because the type of welding that I'm doing with this unit is mostly for small, relatively, RC scale chassis. These are mostly made out of 3/16 solid rod with some 1/8 inch mixed in, as well as various degrees of plate, anywhere from 24 gauge sheet metal all the way up to 1/8 inch plate in the case of this chassis here. So my material size is fairly small, and this welder has no problems with doing material larger than this, but for me to get the features that I was really interested in, this unit really does the job. Now, this kit came with pretty much everything I needed except a bottle, and I already had a bottle because I've already had a TIG. So I was able to take all the stuff that came with my last TIG and I was able to sell that off, and now I have this unit and I was able to just throw everything right up there and get into welding here pretty quickly. While I was at it, I also picked up one of the Razorweld hoods. Once I found out that Razorweld's colors were orange and black, kind of had to pick one of these up just as coincidence. As you can see, orange is one of my favorite colors. Getting this machine fired up and go over a little bit of the features and setup. Now, I'm new to high frequency welding, and I'm a pretty amateur TIG welder at best in any respect. So I'll get the machine fired up and kind of go through the functions on the all digital display here on the front. As I mentioned, all digital display on the front of this. Very different from the setup that I was used to using with that Thermal Arc 95S, which basically just had one dial for the amperage. This one, I've gone through and I think I have the hang of most of the settings here. In the top right corner here, there's 3 LEDs indicating 3 different types of settings. DC pulse, straight DC, and then DC for stick welding. Now, it comes with the full stick welding package as well. I probably will never use it, but it is an option for this machine. I plan to use this mostly on DC pulse for now anyway. Now, next to those 3 LEDs, there is 2 LEDs here. The top one here, which is lit up in red, is actually showing that this unit is in remote mode, meaning that you can adjust the amperage with the dial here on the torch. So if I rotate that dial, you can see that it will change the peak amperage in my pulse welding. If you press and hold the button here on the torch for 5 seconds, it will turn this off of remote mode and put all of the control onto the unit itself. Now that light's off, it gives you an audible tone letting you know that it's been taken out of remote mode and now is on the machine only. You have to do that without it starting the arc, so it won't ever turn on or off of remote mode while an arc's going. Now, again, I was talking about the 2T and 4T modes. You toggle those with this button here. Simply go through it. There's 3 LEDs. There's also a spot mode. Like I said, I'll be using this mostly in the 2T mode. Now, as far as the rest of the settings on this machine, so far I've only got a chance to weld maybe 10 or 15 small little pieces just to get a feel for it and try and set my base settings. So, starting at the beginning here, there's 2 LEDs down by the button itself, which is pulse percentage and the hertz of the pulse. So as far as hertz percentage, the percentage of the actual pulse in a 100% segment, I've got it set to 65. So 65% of the time it will be at my peak amperage, and the other 35% it will be at my base amperage. As far as hertz goes, I've set it to 3 cycles per second. So far, I've only tried, I think I've tried anywhere from 1 to 5, and 3 just kind of happened to be where I liked it. Again, that's pretty dependent on the size of material that I figure that I'm using. Right now, like I said, 3 seems to be working well. Going into the cycle here, the pre-flow gas I've got set to half a second. Startup amperage I've got set all the way down at the minimum, which is 10. As far as adjusting any of these things, this dial here, simply rotate it and you can set it wherever you'd like. Again, for the small materials I'm doing, I've got it set down to the minimum. As far as ramp up time, right now I'm at 1 second. I played around with it a little bit. I've liked that anywhere from half a second to 1 second. So I'm kind of playing around with that and really figuring out where I like. With this 3/16 solid rod, that 1 second seemed to work fairly well so far. With the 1/8 inch stuff, I've kind of liked it closer to the half second. As far as peak amperage, I have adjusted a little bit with that torch there now that when I was showing it earlier. But for this 3/16, I've liked it as high as 45 and as low as 35. Now, I have not been using the torch in remote mode because I'm just not quite comfortable with that adjustment yet. And with the size of material that I'm doing so small, for the most part, I like to just set it in the machine and not worry about it. The welds go very quickly with this size of material, so I don't find myself adjusting the amperage while I'm welding with something like this. So for right now, I'm going to set it at 45. Base amperage, I've set it at 20. So far, that just seems like a fairly intermediate level, and that's worked pretty well with this pulse welding as far as that I've done so far. Getting into the ramp down, I've gone to half a second. I've played with that a little bit higher and a little bit lower. That half second I'm okay with. That's probably about as long as I like with what I've got right now. Once I get more comfortable with it, as I'm finishing off the weld, if I can better time my release of the button, that may fall into place, and I may be able to turn that back up to a second. But for right now, half a second's about as high as I can go and be very comfortable while I'm welding. And finish amperage, I've got set to 10 again. Now, the other setting, the last setting here, is the post-cooling of the gas. This is one of the little things that I didn't really think about when I was purchasing it, but is probably one of the things that I like the most about this machine. Having the solenoid-controlled gas settings, being able to dial those in on the machine itself, rather than having to manually open and close the nozzle on the torch like I was using with my lift TIG before, that has been huge for me, and I really liking that function. My very first bottle through the lift TIG, I went through it pretty quickly as I was pre-flowing and post-cooling much too long, as I was completely green to TIG welding. This, even if I was green, I would be able to dial that in a little bit easier, but so far that's been great. Right now I've got it set to 1.5 seconds, and I'll have to play around with where I feel that time is best. For now, that's really the basic settings that I've learned with this machine. I've been leaving it set on the peak amperage setting on the digital display here so that I can easily come over and adjust my amperage if I ever feel that I'm burning too hot or too cool. That pulse function is very nice. With my lift TIG function, I was usually going only to about 35 max when I was doing the 3/16 solid rod. And that was getting it was plenty hot. But with this, I can crank up that amperage, get a better penetration, but that pulse is allowing me to add less heat to the chassis I'm finding, and I'm actually really liking it. hopefully as I get further into fabrication of these chassis, I'll find that I get less distortion or tweaking on the chassis as I build due to that. All right, so I've grabbed a handful of random pieces of 3/16 here. I'm gonna try and throw down a handful of welds consecutively. Try to do that without cutting, and then I'll show you those on the camera just to show you how a series of them looks without trying to just pick and choose my best welds, however good or bad they may be. As I get more time in on this machine, I'm really looking forward to how my welds will improve. That pulse function is very, very interesting to use. I'm really liking that, and I can't wait to really dial in my settings. I can already tell how my welds are giving that stacked appearance, and I really am looking forward to how that will improve the appearance of my welds on my chassis and make it look more like the talented fabricators can do when they're using a TIG on a full-size chassis or something like that. You can really get that stacked coin look. All right, now I'm gonna take the camera and go in real close, trying to give you guys a better look at my welds. Again, I do not claim to be a professional welder. I'm a very amateur TIG welder at best, and I just want to preface that before I get into this video. This joint, I ended up releasing the button a little sooner to try and see how I liked that ramp down, and I ended up getting a little short on my weld there. This one I felt a little bit more comfortable on, as well as that one, and finally the one here on the end. But anyway, fairly small little piece, just threw a handful of little scraps together, and that's the output from this. So far I'm extremely happy. I'm looking forward to, again, getting more time in under my belt on this machine and really learning and getting to know exactly how my settings are going to affect my output. So at this point, that's all I got. That's kind of my initial thoughts on this machine. Couldn't be happier that I got to upgrade, and I'm really looking forward to what I'll be able to do in the future with this machine. So with that, watch for this to show up in a lot of my future videos, as this will be my main machine for fabrication from now. But with that, I'm going to get into working on some of these chassis over here that I really got to get out to some of these guys. So thanks to them for their patience, and hopefully the new machine will get you a nicer looking product.